Hello crafters, this is Yana Smakula. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am very excited to join Simon Says Stamp for their latest Hello Beautiful release block hop, and I have a simple but very colorful card to share featuring the newest Our Home stamp set. Now, this card took a lot of trial and error. I ended up having to remake each part of this card several times just because it simply did not look the way I wanted. But that's the beauty of card making. I enjoyed the process, and I think that is what matters the most. So here's a look at the new stamp set. This is called Our Home, and I love that large, big house. You also have the hills stamp in here. You have several trees. You have the sun, the sky, or the clouds. And you also have a couple of different sentiments in here. Now, I have already pre-planned my card idea. I want to stamp the house in the center of my card. I want to add some hills to create the horizon line. I then want to add a sentiment above the house, and I want to make a very colorful and bold background. I'm starting to work on my card by stamping the main image, the house, onto Neenah Solar White 80-pound cardstock in Memento Tuxedo Black ink. Now, because I didn't color this exactly how I wanted, I ended up having to re-stamp this image later and recolor it. I ended up having to cut it out and pop it up on my card. So there are actually multiple ways to doing this. If you want a one-layer card, you can go ahead and stamp it onto your panel, mask the panel, and then color the house. Or if you have the coordinating dies, and if you're not really into one-layer cards, you can skip masking and just stamp the house onto a separate panel of cardstock, color that, cut it out, and then just foam mount that onto your card without the need to create any masks. Because I was aiming for a flatter card, I wanted this card to be not one layer, but flatter. I did do some masking. I have already created masks using masking paper, and I've masked the house. Next, I'm using the image of the hills, and I'm going to stamp it on either side of the house to create the horizon line for my little scene. I'm using, again, the same Memento Tuxedo Black ink. This is Copic marker friendly ink, and I know I will be coloring my images with Copic markers, hence the choice of ink for today's project. So I stamped the hills on the left of my house, and now I'm stamping the hills on the right of my house, completing that horizon line. I'm going to mask the hills, so I now not only have the house masked, but also the hills, and I'm going to work on my background. I want to create a colorful sunset type of background, very similar to what I did on this card, shared not too long ago. This card actually has its own video where I go in depth and explain in depth the process of creating that colorful background. Now, to create a background like this, and you can see that I am actually redoing this card now, you can see that my masks are dirty, and that means that I am re-blending the background. I didn't like the first background that I made. The sun was a little bit different. Well, not different. The sun was kind of odd, so I didn't like it, and so I had to re-stamp the panel, and now I'm re-blending the background. I decided to use 4 colors of ink: yellow, pink, magenta, and purple. So I'm starting with yellow, and this is Lemon Zing, and I'm doing my angled ink blending thing. Now, the way you do this is you need a straight edge. So I'm using one of Simon's A2 mask stencils, and I'm just using a straight edge of that stencil to create a portion of my sky. So I'm blending from that mask towards the horizon line. And you can see that I have a lot of ink, a lot more vibrant yellow towards the top, and it nearly fades into white. And that's the idea for this type of blending, for this type of background. You want to have a lot of vibrant color on one edge, and you want that to gradually fade into white. I'm going to reposition my stencils, so I've masked that yellow portion, but I position my stencil a little bit above the yellow section so that I'm creating a bit of a white gap, and you'll see what I mean once I'm done with this background. And I also positioned another mask to create an edge for my next section, which I'm going to blend with a dull pink. I really like this color. It's very vibrant, very bold pink. It's not your typical color choice for a sky, but we're not making a typical card. We're making bright and happy card. So I've ink blended yellow, I've ink blended pink. I'm going to repeat the same steps. I'm going to mask that pink section, and I'm going to position my stencil so that it overlaps a little bit more of my background. I have about 1/8 or maybe 1/16 of an inch of the white space masked with the mask, and I'm adding another mask to create another section to mask that next section, which I'm blending with the magenta ink. And then going to once again repeat the whole process and ink blend the last section for this card using the deep purple ink. So this is going to create a very unusual sky for my card, but that's the idea. Like I said, I want this card to be different. I want it to be bold and colorful and cheerful and, I don't know, spring-like, I guess. So let's take a look at the background. I really like all of the colors. I like the vibrancy, and I think it just pops. Now here's a look at the original background that I made. You can see that that sky did not look good. I mean, it ended up looking so, I don't know, dark. Too dark, I would say. So that's why I had to reblend the background. So I removed the mask and you can see how this looks. Now I'm not quite sure where I went to position the sun. This time I thought about blending it on the left-hand side of the house, but I don't know why. I think I forgot. And then I ended up ink blending it on the left-hand side of the house, just like I did on my original card. When you look at the finished card photo, you actually can't see the sun that much. This time I used Simon's Sunshine ink, and I was using a very light hand. I didn't want my sun to be this vibrant. I didn't want it to be that dark, so I went very light-handed. And while you can see it right now, but once the ink dries, you will be able to just barely see that sun in the background. Now, I also ink blended the hills. I didn't want to use a coloring medium. I could have used my Copic markers to color the hills, but I wanted to continue that ink blended look on the other section of the card, on the hills. So I just used the negative hill masks to protect my ink blended sky. And so I ink blended the hills using Simon Says Stamp Jelly Bean ink to create these fun green hills for my scene. When I ink blend, I prefer to use the edge of my ink blending tool versus the entire tool. This gives me more control, and this allows me to ink blend smaller sections easier without having the ink all over the place. Now, this is where my card took a hit again. I wanted to color the house in very vibrant, in bold colors, but by the time I was done, it kind of looked too much. It looked as if the colors on the house and the colors on the background were competing, and the card just looked too colorful. I don't know if that's possible, but it ended up looking like too much color. So I wanted to tone it down a little bit. And to do that, I re-stamped the same house image. And this time I picked much softer colors of ink. So here I'm first using the YG01 to create the green grass or the green shrubs, the color of the green shrubs in front of the house. And I'm also using the YG03 to add little dots. So I first used the YG01 to add a solid layer of color. And then I came in with the YG03 to add dots of color that created texture. Now, to add detail to my house, I used a W1 marker. I wanted the house to be actually white. I decided I didn't want to add any other color. I just wanted it to be white. So I used a W1 marker, which is a very light gray, and I just used that marker to add shading under the roof, under the windows, and anywhere where I had the marks on the front of the house. I also used the same marker to add shading to the chimneys and to the little piece above the door. Next, to color the windows, I used B000. I just wanted the windows to look light blue. I wasn't being very precise. I just added little dabs of color, I would say. Next, I came in with a Y15 marker to add yellow color to some of the flowers. I love that the image of this house has little flowers built into it. And then I also used the RV00 marker to make the rest of the flowers pink. The door was colored using the same W1 marker, and I also used that to color some of the stones in front of the door. Now, as for the roof, I wasn't sure how I wanted to color it. Once again, I was kind of afraid to use some other colors to bring in any other bold or dark colors. So I just went with a W1 marker and I added a solid layer of light gray color to the roof. Next, I used a W3 marker and I just freehanded horizontal lines to add some detail to the roof to make it look like it had some texture. So not like one solid roof piece, but some pretty roof texture to my house. There are coordinating dies available for this stamp set. I don't have any dies on hand, so I just went ahead and used my scissors and I cut this image out right up to the edge. My idea was to place it over the originally colored image on my ink blended background, so I didn't really want to have any white edges to this house, so I cut it right up to the edge and I used my tonic scissors for this. I love these for anything that requires specific fussy cutting. These are probably the best scissors for cutting anything like this. So here you can see how all of this is going to look once finished. I like this new lighter house option on the background. It really doesn't compete with the background, but rather complements it. Now, the stamp set also includes several images of the trees, and so I went ahead and stamped those using VersaFine Onyx Black ink onto my panel just above the horizon line. I didn't add any coloring to these. I didn't want to. I could have done some paper piecing. I could have stamped the same images onto green cardstock or stamped the same images onto white, for example, colored them using some green and then cut them out and pop those onto my card. But I didn't want to do that. I just wanted an illusion of the images on my background. Next, to create a sentiment for this card, I picked several sentiments from this stamp or several words from this stamp. I like how the sentiment in here is the type that you can create yourself. So you have several options. And the option that I went for reads, "You are welcome anytime." And I like this kind of card. You can give it to a friend who perhaps likes to stop by your house for a cup of coffee or just to hang out and chat. I think this is a perfect card for that kind of friend. I also used my YG01 marker and I added some dotted detail in front of the house under those shrubs. I wanted to extend the grass a little bit further, so I just did that with the YG01 marker and the YG03 markers to add some color. And you just basically add little dots. You just dot the color and it's good to go. I foam mounted my panel onto an A2 white side folding, or actually top folding card base, and I embellished my card with the Simon Says Stamp Strawberry Shortcake Sequin Mix. Thanks so much for joining me today. Be sure to head over to my blog for a giveaway and to join the rest of the blog hop. Love you guys. I'll see you next time.